I never expected my family's intervention about my failing business would coincide with the biggest day of my professional life. As I pulled into my parents' driveway, my stomach twisted into knots. 3 years of sacrificing everything to build Virtual Med, my medical training VR platform, had led to this moment. My traditionally successful family waited inside, ready to confront me about abandoning my law career for entrepreneurship. Dad's text was clear. Family meeting. Concerned about your situation? I took a deep breath and opened the car door, unaware that a Wall Street Journal reporter had just published a feature that would change everything. The crisp autumn air hit my face as I walked up the stone pathway to my parents' colonial-style home in Westchester County. The house represented everything about my family's values: traditional, established, and impressive to outsiders. I smoothed down my simple blazer and jeans, wishing I'd worn something more formal to counter their inevitable criticisms. 3 years earlier, I'd been an associate at Harrington & Reed, one of New York's top law firms. My parents had beamed with pride at my law school graduation, and my father, Thomas, a senior partner at his own firm, had personally introduced me to the hiring partners. The trajectory had been set: work 80 hours a week, make partner by 35, and become another Wilson family success story. But during my second year at the firm, my best friend from college died due to a surgical error. The preventable mistake haunted me, and I became obsessed with how medical training could be improved. When I discovered the potential of virtual reality for medical simulation, I couldn't ignore it. I spent nights and weekends developing a prototype, and when an angel investor offered seed funding, I made the leap. My resignation letter had triggered the first family emergency meeting. "You're throwing away a guaranteed partnership track for a tech pipe dream," Dad had argued. "The medical field is regulated to death. You'll burn through your money before getting approvals." Mom had added her worry, manifesting as criticism. Only my younger brother, Jason, a college sophomore studying computer science, had showed genuine interest. "The haptic feedback system you're developing actually sounds revolutionary, Linda." The memory of that first confrontation followed me as I rang the doorbell. My younger brother, Jason, answered, giving me a quick hug. "Brace yourself," he whispered. "Audrey's been here for an hour already, talking about some big news." Great. My sister had arrived early to establish home court advantage. Audrey was 5 years older than me, a corporate attorney who had followed our father's exact career playbook. Her husband, Scott, worked in finance, and they represented the gold standard of success in our family's eyes. Linda, finally. My mother, Margaret, emerged from the kitchen, assessing me with concerned eyes. "You look tired, honey. Have you been sleeping?" Before I could answer, she added, "Audrey and Scott are in the living room. Your father's just finishing a call." I stepped into the immaculate living room where Audrey sat with Scott on the leather sofa. My sister wore a tailored navy suit, her blonde hair in a perfect bob. She stood to greet me with an air kiss near my cheek. "Good to see you, Linda. We were just wondering when you'd arrive." Her tone carried that familiar note of subtle superiority. Scott nodded at me from the couch, barely looking up from his phone. "Hey there." Jason dropped onto the armchair across from them. "So how's the startup world, Linda? Any cool new developments?" Before I could answer, Dad entered the room. Thomas Wilson had the commanding presence of someone used to controlling boardrooms. At 62, he remained fit and distinguished, with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. "Linda," he said, giving me a brief hug that felt more like a business greeting. "Let's move to the dining room. Your mother's prepared dinner." The formal dining room had always been where family announcements and confrontations happened. As we settled around the large mahogany table, Mom brought out a roast with vegetables, her go-to comfort meal for tense family gatherings. "So, Scott, how's the new position at Goldman?" Dad asked after we'd started eating. Scott launched into details about his recent promotion while Audrey beamed beside him. The conversation then shifted to Jason's internship prospects, my parents nudging him toward established companies rather than startups. I pushed food around my plate, waiting for the inevitable pivot to my situation. I didn't have long to wait. "So, Linda," Dad finally said, setting down his fork with precision, Your mother and I wanted to get everyone together because we're concerned. About what exactly I asked, though, I knew perfectly well. Don't be coy, Audrey interjected. Your company. Mom says you've barely called in months. And the last time you did, you mentioned cash flow problems. I silently cursed myself for ever mentioning business challenges to my mother. We're going through a standard growth phase. All startups face cash constraints before their next funding round. Dad shook his head. This is exactly why we advised against this venture. The legal profession offers stability. 3 years at Harrington and Reed, and you'd be on track for junior partner by now. Speaking of which, Audrey straightened in her chair with a practiced smile. I actually have some news to share. The timing was so perfect I almost laughed. Of course, Audrey would use this moment to highlight her success against my apparent failure. I received the call yesterday, she continued. The partners voted unanimously. As of next month, I'm being made junior partner at Davis & Klein. The table erupted in excitement. Mom clapped her hands together. Dad stood to embrace Audrey. And even Jason offered sincere congratulations. Scott sat back, looking smugly satisfied. That's wonderful news, honey, Mom gushed. The youngest female partner in the firm's history. We always knew you had it in you, Dad added, his chest puffed with pride. Following the plan pays off. The subtext was unmistakable. Audrey had done everything right while I had wandered off the path. I forced a smile. Congratulations, Audrey. That's really great. The table fell quiet, as all eyes turned to me, waiting for more enthusiasm I couldn't fake. Dad seized the momentary silence, raising his glass in a toast that would change the evening's direction entirely. To Audrey, he announced, looking directly at me with pointed emphasis, who made partner while you play entrepreneur. This is what commitment to a real career looks like. The room seemed to freeze. Mom looked uncomfortable, Jason winced. And Audrey had the grace to appear slightly embarrassed by Dad's bluntness. But no one contradicted him. The words struck like a physical blow. 3 years of 18-hour workdays mortgaging my apartment, skipping vacations and social events, all dismissed as playing at business. I gripped my water glass so hard I thought it might shatter. I swallowed hard, fighting back tears that threatened to expose my vulnerability. The worst part wasn't Dad's dismissive words, but the silence that followed. Nobody challenged his characterization of my work as merely playing at business. I'm not playing at anything. I finally said, my voice quieter than intended. Virtual Med has contracts with 4 teaching hospitals. Our technology is saving lives by improving surgical training. Mom reached over to pat my hand. Honey, we know you've worked hard, but maybe it's time to consider a more practical path. Your law degree is still valuable. It's not too late to return to practice. Margaret's right, Dad nodded. I spoke with Bill Harrison last week. His firm is expanding their healthcare division. With your background, you could head their compliance department within a few years. The assumption that I'd failed before I'd even had a chance to succeed burned inside me. My phone buzzed in my purse. The 4th notification in 20 minutes. But I ignored it, determined to defend myself first. Our latest product trial showed a 63% reduction in first-year surgical errors, I said. We're in final negotiations with national health systems for a nationwide implementation. If it goes through, if, Audrey interrupted, shaking her head. Business is about results, not potential. Davis & Klein's tech department sees dozens of healthcare startups with promising technology that never scales. Audrey could help you transition to tech law, Mom suggested brightly. You could still work in the same field, but with actual income and stability. I could put in a word, Audrey offered with the magnanimous air of someone throwing a lifeline. They're always looking for associates with specialized knowledge. Jason, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. But Linda's technology is actually incredible. I've seen the prototype. Traditional medical simulators don't come close to the haptic feedback and real-time decision trees her system offers. That's enough, Jason, Dad said dismissively. You don't understand the realities of business yet. Ideas and technology are only part of the equation. Execution, financing, regulation. These determine success or failure. My phone buzzed again. This time Scott noticed. "Someone really wants your attention," he remarked. I glanced at my phone and saw 6 messages from Jack, my co-founder and CTO. "Call me now, huge news, the WSJ article dropped earlier, you seeing this?" I set the phone down, confused. The Wall Street Journal article about our technology wasn't supposed to publish until next week after the National Health Systems deal was finalized. Dad was in full lecture mode now. "The problem with your generation is the lack of patience. You want instant success without paying dues. I spent 12 years as an associate before making partner. Audrey put in 8 years of 80-hour weeks. That's the real world, Linda." As he spoke, Mom's phone chimed with a news alert. She glanced down automatically, then froze, her eyes widening as she read the screen. "Thomas," she interrupted, her voice strange. She looked up at me in confusion. "Linda, why didn't you tell us?" "Tell you what?" I asked. She turned her phone around, showing a Wall Street Journal headline. "Virtual reality pioneer revolutionizes medical training. National Health Systems signs $350 million implementation deal." "Why is your company valued at $1 billion in the Wall Street Journal?" Mom asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The room went absolutely silent. For several seconds, nobody moved. Dad's hand remained frozen, wine glass suspended midair. Audrey's perfect composure cracked as her jaw literally dropped. Jason was the first to react, reaching for Mom's phone. "Holy crap, Linda, you're officially a unicorn!" he exclaimed, scanning the article. "A what?" Mom asked. "A unicorn startup valued at over $1 billion. Jason explained, his voice filled with awe. "Let me see. Virtual Med's proprietary haptic technology represents a paradigm shift in medical training. This is insane." I finally checked Jack's messages. Beyond his excited alerts about the article he'd written, NHS signed full implementation across 200 facilities. Term sheet exactly as we hoped. Sequoia and Benchmark both called with Series C offers. Media going crazy. "Where are you?" My hands trembled as I processed the information. The NHS deal we'd been working toward for 18 months had finally closed, and at our full asking price. After 3 years of nonstop work, rejection, and near bankruptcies, we'd achieved the breakthrough. "Let me see that," Dad said, taking the phone from Jason. His expression shifted between disbelief, shock, and something I rarely saw, uncertainty. "This can't be right. $1 billion valuation. For virtual reality software." "It's not just software," I said, finding my voice. "It's an integrated hardware-software platform that replicates surgical conditions with unprecedented accuracy. The haptic feedback systems allow surgeons to feel tissue resistance exactly as they would in actual procedures." Scott had pulled out his own phone and was rapidly searching for additional information. "Stock in medical device companies is already responding to this announcement," he noted, with newfound respect in his voice. "This is legitimate." "But why didn't you tell us you were on the verge of such a deal?" Mom asked, looking hurt. The question ignited something inside me. After years of dismissal now, they were upset I hadn't shared good news. "Because it wasn't finalized," I replied carefully. "And because the last time I shared promising news about a potential contract, Dad called it counting chickens before they hatch, and spent an hour explaining how 9 out of 10 startups fail." Dad had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I was trying to help you manage expectations. This business is incredibly volatile." "No, you were undermining me," I corrected him. "You've never believed in what I'm building." Audrey, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. "This is all very impressive, Linda, but the article doesn't tell the whole story." Her fingers moved rapidly over her phone screen. "What about the University Medical Center incident from last month?" My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" She turned her phone toward me, showing a legal news bulletin. "A malpractice lawsuit was filed yesterday against University Medical Center in Boston, one of your pilot sites. A patient died during a procedure performed by a surgeon who trained on your system." The air left the room. Jack hadn't mentioned this. That's not possible, I said, reaching for her phone. Our system is for training only. It doesn't direct actual surgical procedures. The complaint specifically mentions Virtual Med. Audrey continued a hint of her earlier superiority returning. The patient's family is alleging that inadequate training on experimental virtual reality systems contributed to the surgeon's error. Dad immediately shifted into crisis management mode. This could be devastating. If your technology is implicated in a patient death, the NHS might pull out regardless of contracts signed. Not to mention the liability, Scott added. A wrongful death suit could bankrupt you before you even get that Series C funding. My triumph evaporated as quickly as it had appeared. The family's focus had instantly shifted from celebrating my unexpected success to dissecting my potential downfall. I need to call Jack, I said, standing up from the table. My legs felt unsteady. Mom reached for my arm. Linda, honey, stay calm. We'll help you through this. The sudden shift to supportive language wasn't lost on me. Failure, they could handle it. Confirmed their worldview. Success, followed by catastrophic failure, fit their narrative even better. I stepped into the hallway and called Jack. Finally, he answered immediately. Where have you been? It's absolute madness here. The servers crashed from traffic after the article went live. And I've got 17 venture capitalists who want meetings tomorrow. And, Jack, I interrupted. There's a malpractice suit at University Medical Center. They're blaming our technology for a patient death. Why didn't you tell me? There was a pause. What? That's the first I'm hearing of it. Who told you this? My sister just found a legal bulletin about it. The family specifically named Virtual Med in the complaint. I could hear Jack typing furiously. Give me a minute. Okay, I see it now. It was filed yesterday afternoon. But, Linda, this doesn't make sense. Dr. Winters at UMC completed less than 20% of the required training modules. We have the logs. He was explicitly told not to use the techniques without completing the full program. Relief flooded through me. So we have documentation proving he didn't follow protocols. Absolutely. His department head actually emailed us about his non-compliance last month. We've got everything to show this isn't on us. I took a deep breath. Okay, I'm coming to the office. We need to get ahead of this. Where are you anyway? Jack asked. Family dinner. I'll explain later. When I returned to the dining room, I found my family in full problem-solving mode. I think Linda should issue a statement immediately distancing herself from the incident, Audrey was saying. Classic crisis management. Express sympathy without accepting responsibility. And she should offer to settle quickly, Dad added. Regardless of fault, a prolonged legal battle could tank the NHS deal. Actually, I interrupted the surgeon in question. Never completed our training program. We have documentation showing he was explicitly warned not to use the techniques without finishing the modules. Our legal position is solid. They all turned to look at me. Are you sure? Dad asked skeptically. Yes. Jack just confirmed it. The department head even documented the surgeon's non-compliance. Well, that's fortunate, Mom said, visibly relieved. Though these things can still be messy, even with documentation. Before anyone could respond, my phone rang with an unknown number. Normally I'd let it go to voicemail, but given the circumstances, I answered. Is this Linda Wilson, founder of Virtual Med? A woman's voice asked. Yes, speaking. This is Allison Grant from Tech Insider. I'm calling about rumors that MedTech Global is preparing a $2 billion acquisition offer for your company following today's NHS announcement. Can you comment? My family watched as I struggled to maintain composure. I'm not aware of any such offer, and we wouldn't comment on rumors regardless. Virtual Med remains focused on our mission to improve medical training outcomes. Sources inside MedTech Global suggest the offer is coming tomorrow. Would you consider selling given your stated mission of improving medical education? Again, I can't comment on hypothetical scenarios. Thank you for your interest. I ended the call and looked up to find 5 pairs of eyes fixed intently on me. $2 billion. Dad said, his voice barely above a whisper. Someone's offering to buy your company for $2 billion. Not officially, I clarified, setting my phone down carefully. That was just a reporter fishing for comments on a rumor. But if MedTech Global is actually interested, Scott interjected, his finance background kicking in. That's a legitimate possibility. They've been acquisitive this year, looking to expand their training division. Dad had completely transformed. The dismissive patriarch who had belittled my career choice minutes ago was now leaning forward with keen interest. $2 billion. Even with investor dilution, your stake would be what? $300 million at least? The speed of his calculations wasn't surprising. What shocked me was how quickly monetary value had changed his perception of my work. I'm not selling the company, I stated firmly. Don't be hasty, Dad cautioned. Acquisitions at this scale don't come along often. You need to seriously consider the opportunity. Thomas is right, Mom added, suddenly animated. This could secure your future forever. I, 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 I. The family that had been staging an intervention about my failed career choices was now eagerly planning how I should manage my billion-dollar company's acquisition. My phone rang again, Jack calling back. I excused myself and stepped into the kitchen. What's happening now? I asked. Our legal team just called Jack, said his voice tight. They've reviewed the UMC situation. The good news is we're well protected legally. The bad news is the press is starting to pick up the story, and it's getting linked to the NHS announcement. How bad is it? Not catastrophic yet, but we need to get ahead of it. And Linda, there's something else. MedTech Global's CEO just emailed directly. They want to meet tomorrow about a strategic partnership, so the acquisition rumor had substance. What do you think? Jack hesitated. Financially, it's a home run. But, you know MedTech's reputation. They acquire innovative companies and then integrate the technology into their existing product lines. Your vision for democratizing medical training might get lost. He was right. MedTech Global was known for acquiring promising medical technology and optimizing it for maximum profit, often making it unaffordable for smaller hospitals, and developing nations exactly the institutions I most wanted to help. We're not selling, I said decisively. Not to MedTech. I figured you'd say that. I'll hold them off for now. Just get here when you can, so we can coordinate on the UMC response. I returned to the dining room where the conversation had evolved into a full-blown acquisition strategy session. The tax implications alone require careful planning, Scott was saying. You'll want to structure any deal to minimize immediate tax burden, and you'll need proper representation, Audrey added. I know several attorneys who specialize in tech acquisitions. I'm not selling the company, I repeated more firmly. They all stopped talking and stared at me. What do you mean you're not selling? Dad asked incredulously. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. It's not about the money. Virtual Med has a specific mission to make advanced medical training accessible to every hospital, not just elite institutions. MedTech Global doesn't share that vision. Linda, be reasonable, Audrey said condescendingly. Every company claims to have a mission, but business is ultimately about return on investment. $2 billion is an extraordinary return. Not to mention, Dad added, this malpractice situation could escalate. Taking the offer now before any complications arise would be the prudent move. I took a deep breath. The malpractice situation is under control. We have clear documentation showing the surgeon failed to complete required training. Our legal team is confident. Legal teams are always confident until they lose, Audrey countered. Trust me. I've seen plenty of solid cases fall apart in court. Mom placed her hand over mine. We just want what's best for you, honey. This kind of money means security for life. I appreciate that, I said, gently removing my hand from hers. But I started Virtual Med because my best friend died from a preventable surgical error. I'm building this to save lives, not to cash out at the first opportunity. Dad shook his head. This idealism is exactly what we worried about when you left law. Business requires pragmatic decision-making, not emotional attachments. It's not emotional to stay committed to your company's core purpose, I argued. It absolutely is, Dad countered, when that commitment costs you $2 billion. My phone rang again, this time showing our lead investor's number. I excused myself once more and took the call in the study. Linda, congratulations on the NHS deal, said Diana, our lead venture capitalist. The valuation jump is well-deserved. Thank you. It's been a wild day. I'll bet. Listen, I'm calling because we've heard about MedTech's interest, and I want to give you a heads up. Their acquisition history isn't great for founders with specific visions like yours. What do you mean? 3 of their last 5 acquisitions resulted in the original technology being shelved or dramatically repurposed. Their primary interest in Virtual Med might not be medical training at all. My stomach tightened. What would it be then? Their gaming division has been looking for advanced haptic technology. Your medical applications are impressive, but the gaming market is exponentially larger. The idea that Virtual Med's life-saving technology could be repurposed for video games made me physically ill. Thanks for the warning, Diana. I have no intention of selling to them. Good. And for what it's worth, the partnership opportunities from the NHS deal will generate plenty of value without an acquisition. Stay the course. I returned to find the family still debating how I should handle the hypothetical billions from a sale I had no intention of making. I raised my voice to interrupt their planning. I need to go to the office. We have to coordinate our response to the malpractice situation before it impacts the NHS rollout. Now it's nearly 9. Mom protested. That's startup life, I said with a pointed look at my father. Not exactly playing at business, is it? Dad had the decency to look uncomfortable. Linda, about what I said earlier. Save it, I cut him off. I need to focus on my company right now. As I gathered my things, Audrey followed me into the hallway. Before you go, there's something I should tell you, she said, lowering her voice. MedTech Global's general counsel reached out to me this afternoon. I stopped cold. What? They're aware of our family connection. They asked if I'd be interested in heading their legal department for the technology division. The division that would absorb Virtual Med. After an acquisition, the betrayal hit like a physical blow. My own sister had been approached to facilitate the dismantling of my company's mission, and she hadn't immediately refused. And what did you tell them? I asked, already knowing the answer. I said I'd consider it depending on circumstances, she admitted without a trace of shame. It's an incredible opportunity, Linda. Twice my current salary, plus equity. So you've been sitting at this table advising me to sell, while hiding the fact that you stand to personally benefit from that sale. I was going to tell you if the offer materialized, she defended. That's a conflict of interest, Audrey. You're an attorney. You know better. Don't be dramatic. I haven't taken any action yet. You didn't disclose a relevant interest while giving me advice. In your profession, that's an ethical violation. Her face hardened. You know what? This is why I didn't tell you immediately. You always react emotionally, instead of seeing the practical reality. This could be good for both of us. Except I'd be abandoning my company's mission while you advance your career. That doesn't sound mutually beneficial to me. Our conversation was interrupted by Dad calling from the dining room. Everything okay out there? Fine, Audrey called back, then lowered her voice. Just think about it, Linda. This could be a win-win if you approach it rationally. As I left my parents' house, I felt more alone than ever. The family that had gathered to intervene in my failing business was now actively undermining my successful one, all while convincing themselves they were helping me. The drive to my office in downtown Manhattan normally took 45 minutes from my parents' suburban home. Tonight it felt like crossing a psychological ocean. My phone rang continuously, Jack, with updates, reporters seeking comments, and even my brother Jason calling to apologize for our family's behavior. "They've always been like this," Jason said when I finally answered his call. "Remember when I wanted to study game design instead of computer science? Dad called it a hobby, not a career. Until I showed him the average salary." "At least they eventually supported you," I said, navigating through late-night traffic. "Only because I compromised. I'm studying practical computer science with game design as a minor." He paused. "But this is different, Linda. A billion-dollar valuation changes everything. They can't dismiss you anymore." But they still were, just in a different way. Instead of dismissing my business as a failure, they were now dismissing my vision as idealistic naivete. When I pulled into the parking garage beneath our office building, Jack was waiting by the elevator. His rumpled appearance, wrinkled shirt, messy hair, and dark circles under his eyes reflected our typical startup grind. "Welcome to the big leagues," he said, attempting humor despite his exhaustion. "Nothing says success like your first malpractice lawsuit and acquisition rumor on the same day." Upstairs, our normally quiet office hummed with activity despite the late hour. Our small team of 15 had gathered in the conference room, laptops, open, empty coffee cups littering the table. "Okay, status update," I announced, dropping my bag and joining them. "What do we know about the UMC situation?" Our general counsel, Melissa, took the lead. "The lawsuit was filed yesterday. Patient's family is claiming wrongful death due to surgical error. The surgeon, Dr. Winters, is named as the primary defendant, but they've included the hospital and peripherally virtual med." "On what basis are we included?" "They're alleging our training system gave Dr. Winters false confidence in a technique he hadn't mastered. But we have extensive documentation showing he only completed 19% of the required modules and ignored multiple warnings not to use the techniques without full certification. So legally we're protected." "Strongly protected," Melissa confirmed. "But there's a PR dimension we need to manage, especially with the NHS announcement and valuation news." Our communications director, Trevor, nodded. "We've drafted a statement expressing sympathy for the family while clearly outlining the safety protocols of our system and the documented warnings to Dr. Winters. We've emphasized that proper completion of our training program has been shown to reduce surgical errors by 63%. "Have you reached out to UMC for coordination?" I asked. "Their legal department is aligned with our position," Melissa confirmed. "They acknowledge Winters didn't follow protocols. They've already provided documents showing he was placed on probation for similar compliance issues before this incident." I felt my shoulders relax slightly. At least professionally, things were under control. The personal betrayal at my family dinner still stung. But here I was, surrounded by people who believed in our mission. My phone rang again, my father. I sent it to voicemail. "What about MedTech Global?" I asked Jack. "Their CEO wants to meet for breakfast tomorrow. I told his assistant you'd be unavailable until next week." "Good. We focus on the NHS implementation first. That's our priority." As the team continued outlining action items, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. "We need to finish our conversation. Your mother is upset. Please call." I ignored it. Then another text arrived. This one from Audrey. "Dad thinks I upset you. For the record, I was just trying to help. The med tech opportunity could benefit us both." The audacity was breathtaking. Before I could process my response, the office door opened, and to my complete shock, my entire family walked in. Dad, Mom, Audrey, Scott, and Jason. The conference room fell silent as everyone turned to stare at the unexpected visitors. "Mr. and Mrs. Wilson," Jack said, recovering first. "This is unexpected. We needed to speak with Linda." Dad said, his commanding presence filling the room. "Family matter." I stood up, embarrassed and angry. "This is completely inappropriate. We're in the middle of managing a situation." "It can't wait," Dad insisted. "Actually, it can," I countered. "I'm running a company that you just learned is valued at $1 billion. Whatever family matter you have can absolutely wait until I've handled my professional responsibilities." Mom stepped forward, her expression pained. "Honey, We just want to clear the air. Your father feels terrible about what he said earlier. The team exchanged awkward glances. Having my family dynamics on display for my employees was mortifying. We can take a break, Jack offered diplomatically. No, I said firmly. We have work to do. My family can wait in my office if they insist on staying. Dad looked stunned by my refusal to accommodate him immediately. For probably the first time in my life, I was directly challenging his authority. Very well, he conceded stiffly. We'll wait. As they filed toward my office, Audrey lingered. This is exactly what I meant about emotional decision-making, she whispered. You're letting personal feelings interfere with professional opportunities. The only person mixing personal and professional interests here is you, I whispered back. Now please wait in my office. It took another 30 minutes to finalize our response strategy. By the time I joined my family, my emotional reserves were depleted. This couldn't have waited, I asked, closing my office door. We're concerned about you, Dad said. The way I left, I interrupted incredulously. Dad, you spent the entire evening dismissing my career as playing entrepreneur until you learned about the valuation. Then suddenly you're interested, but only in how I can sell the company. And now I discover Audrey has been approached for a position that directly conflicts with my interests. So yes, I left abruptly. That's not fair, Audrey objected. I haven't accepted anything, but you're considering it. You're literally contemplating a job that would involve dismantling what I've built. No one's dismantling anything, Dad interjected. Acquisitions are normal business transitions. Except MedTech doesn't want our medical training mission, I revealed. They want our haptic technology for their gaming division. Everything we've built to improve medical outcomes would be repurposed for video games. That gave them pause. How do you know that? Scott asked. Because unlike some people in this room, my investors actually look out for my interests. They warned me about MedTech's pattern with acquisitions. Mom looked genuinely confused. But wouldn't they want the medical training aspect too? That's what got them the valuation. The technology has broader applications, I explained. Medical training is a limited market compared to consumer gaming. They'd extract the valuable intellectual property and likely shelve the medical focus. Even so, Dad argued, reverting to his earlier position, $2 billion would allow you to start another company with a similar mission. You could do even more good with that kind of capital. Or I could continue building the successful company I already have, I countered. The one that just signed a $350 million contract. The one that exists specifically to prevent deaths like Amy's. Amy had been my best friend since childhood. The one whose death from a surgical error had inspired virtual med. I rarely spoke about her, finding the loss still painful years later. Who's Amy, Mom? Asked, her expression softening. Before I could answer, Jack knocked and entered with an urgent expression. Sorry to interrupt, but I just got off the phone with MedTech's CEO. They're not taking the delayed meeting well. He specifically said, and I quote, "If Linda Wilson thinks playing hard to get will increase our offer, she's mistaken. We have alternatives." What alternatives? I asked. Jack hesitated, glancing at my family. They can stay, I said, resigned to the situation. He mentioned they've been in preliminary talks with SurgeSim about their haptic technology. It's not as advanced as ours, but it's close enough that with investment they could catch up. SurgeSim is a direct competitor, I explained to my confused family. Their technology is similar, but focuses more on the visual simulation than the tactile feedback that makes ours unique. There's something else, Jack added reluctantly. He implied they already have an inside track on our proprietary algorithms. That's impossible, I said. Those are completely secure. Unless, Jack said carefully, someone with knowledge of our systems has been consulting with them. A cold realization washed over me. I turned slowly to Audrey. When exactly did MedTech approach you about the legal position? She shifted uncomfortably. 3 weeks ago. And what materials did they share with you about our technology during those discussions? Standard overview documents, she said defensively. Nothing proprietary. Did you sign an NDA? I pressed. Of course. So you entered a legal arrangement with a company interested in acquiring mine-reviewed technical materials related to our industry, and never thought to mention it until they made their intentions clear. Dad, interjected Linda, you're making accusations without evidence. I'm asking questions about a suspicious timing coincidence, I corrected him. MedTech suddenly has insight into our proprietary systems, and I discover my sister has been in discussions with them for weeks. I would never compromise your company's intellectual property, Audrey insisted, but her face had flushed. Maybe not intentionally, I conceded. But did you discuss our technology with them? Did you offer insights based on what Jason or I have shared with you over the years? Her silence was answer enough. I can't believe this, I said, the betrayal cutting deeper than I'd imagined possible. My own sister. I didn't share anything significant, she finally said. Just general observations about the direction of the industry. Nothing they couldn't learn from public sources. Then why did their CEO imply they have inside information? He's probably bluffing, Scott suggested. Standard negotiation tactic. I turned to Jack. Get Melissa in here. We need to evaluate whether we have an IP vulnerability. As Jack left to find our counsel, Dad attempted to regain control of the situation. Let's all calm down. Audrey wouldn't deliberately harm your business interests. This is just a misunderstanding. Is it I challenged? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like Audrey saw an opportunity to advance her career at my expense and took it. That's not fair, Audrey protested. Then explain it to me. Explain how accepting a position with a company trying to acquire mine, possibly against my wishes, isn't a direct conflict with my interests. I thought it might actually help you, she exclaimed. If the acquisition became inevitable, having someone who cares about your vision in their legal department could protect your interests. The justification was so transparently self-serving I almost laughed. And the substantial salary increase and title promotion had nothing to do with it. Of course they did, she admitted. But that doesn't mean I couldn't also help you. The office door opened again, but instead of Jack and Melissa, my mother slipped back in. I hadn't even noticed her leave during the confrontation. Mom, not now, I said, exhausted by the family drama. But Mom's expression stopped me. She looked shaken, her normally composed features disturbed by something profound. I need to say something, she announced, her voice uncharacteristically firm. Something I should have told all of you years ago. She took a deep breath, and in that moment she seemed to age a decade before my eyes. The reason I've always been so anxious about Linda's career choices, about all your choices, is because I lost my own sister to a medical error. My little sister Sarah died during what should have been a routine procedure when I was 22 years old. The revelation landed like a thunderclap in the silent office. What Dad said clearly, as shocked as the rest of us. Margaret, you never told me you had a sister. Because it was too painful, she said simply. She was 19. The surgeon nicked an artery during an appendectomy. Such a simple procedure, and she bled out on the table because he wasn't properly trained on a new laparoscopic technique. She turned to me, tears forming in her eyes. When you told us about your friend Amy and why you wanted to start virtual med, I couldn't bear to hear it. It brought everything back. I pushed you toward law because it was safe. I couldn't stand the thought of you pouring your heart into a mission tied to such painful memories. The confession transformed everything. My mother's constant anxiety, her pushing me toward stable careers, her discomfort with my passion for medical training. It all suddenly made sense. Mom, I said, struggling to find words. I had no idea. No one did, she replied. I buried it so deep I almost convinced myself it never happened. But watching you all fight today over money versus mission, she shook her head. Sarah would have been alive if your technology had existed then. How could I let you abandon that for any amount of money? The room fell completely silent as the weight of her revelation settled over us. My father reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. Audrey looked stricken. All her earlier defiance evaporated, and in that moment of raw truth, the dynamics of our family shifted permanently. Mom's revelation created a strange stillness in the office. Dad, normally quick with solutions and directives, sat speechless. Audrey's perfect composure had crumbled entirely. Even Scott, typically detached from family matters, appeared genuinely moved. Jack knocked gently and entered with Melissa, our counsel. They immediately sensed the charged atmosphere. "Should we come back?" Jack asked uncertainly. "No," I said, gathering myself. "We need to address the potential IP issue." Melissa took a seat, opening her laptop. "What specifically are we concerned about?" I explained the situation as clinically as possible. MedTech's implied knowledge of our systems, Audrey's previously undisclosed relationship with them, and the potential vulnerability. I didn't share anything proprietary. Audrey reiterated, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "I swear it." Melissa nodded professionally. "Even inadvertent disclosures can create exposure. Can you walk us through exactly what was discussed in your meetings with MedTech?" As Audrey began recounting her interactions, Jack's phone chimed with a message. He checked it, and his eyes widened. "What is it?" I asked. "Our contact at NHS just forwarded an email from MedTech. They're claiming our technology infringes on patents they acquired last year. And they're suggesting NHS should delay implementation pending resolution." "That's absurd," I said. "We've done comprehensive IP clearance on every aspect of our system." "It's a pressure tactic," Melissa observed. "They're trying to force you to the negotiating table by threatening the NHS deal." Dad, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "This is standard corporate bullying. They know they don't have a case, but they can create enough uncertainty to damage your position with NHS." For once, his corporate experience was actually helpful. "So how do we counter it?" "You need to reassure NHS immediately about your IP position," he advised. "Then you need leverage against MedTech, something that makes attacking you more costly than cooperating." Audrey shifted uncomfortably. "I might have something relevant." All eyes turned to her. During my discussions with their legal team, they mentioned their anxiety about a Department of Justice inquiry into their hospital software division. Apparently, there are concerns about anti-competitive practices in how they've bundled services. Audrey, Dad said sharply, "That's confidential information you received as a potential employee." I know, she acknowledged. "But if they're threatening Linda's company with baseless patent claims, while secretly planning to shelve life-saving technology for gaming applications, the ethical calculation changes." It was the first time I could remember Audrey ever siding with me against a professional advantage. "We can't use that directly," Melissa cautioned. "But it gives us context for how vulnerable they might feel to public scrutiny of their acquisition practices." Jack's face lit up with sudden inspiration. "The Wall Street Journal reporter who wrote today's piece, she's been investigating medical technology consolidation for months. If she knew MedTech was trying to acquire breakthrough medical training technology for gaming applications while they're under DOJ scrutiny, she'd have a compelling story angle," I finished his thought. "We don't even need to mention the DOJ angle directly," Melissa added. "Simply being transparent about their intentions for the technology would be damaging enough to their healthcare reputation." Dad looked impressed, despite himself. "It's a solid counter-strategy. They apply pressure through NHS. You apply pressure through potential public relations damage." I turned to Jack. "Draft a response to NHS addressing the IP concerns directly. Include our full patent clearance documentation. Then reach out to the Journal reporter. Don't mention MedTech's offer explicitly, but say we're available to discuss the future of medical training technology and industry consolidation trends." "On it," Jack said, leaving with Melissa to execute the plan. The office fell quiet again, just my family remaining. Mom still looked shaken by her own revelation. Dad appeared to be processing everything, his typical certainty replaced by thoughtful consideration. Audrey sat with an expression I'd rarely seen on her genuine regret. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I didn't realize. I never thought about your technology in terms of real lives. It was just business to me. Another career move. That's been the problem all along," I said quietly. "None of you ever really understood why I'm doing this. It was never about the money or status. It was about Amy. And apparently, though I didn't know it, it was also about Aunt Sarah. Mom wiped away a tear. I should have told you about her years ago. Maybe then you would have understood why I pushed so hard against your riskier choices. I wasn't trying to undermine you, I was trying to protect you from disappointment. I know that, now I acknowledged. But Mom, this is exactly why virtual med matters. Every successful implementation means fewer families experiencing what you went through. Dad cleared his throat. When I said that comment about playing entrepreneur at dinner, he shook his head. I was wrong. Completely wrong. What you've built here isn't a game or a whim. It's substantial and important. Coming from him, the admission was monumental. For my entire life, earning Dad's approval had seemed conditional on following his prescribed path to success. This was the first time he'd acknowledged the validity of my chosen path. Thank you, I said simply. Audrey stood up and walked to the window overlooking the Manhattan skyline. I'm withdrawing from consideration for the medtech position, she announced. And I'll provide a formal statement to your legal team, documenting all my interactions with them to protect your intellectual property position. Her decision visibly cost her, but for once she was prioritizing family loyalty over career advancement. I appreciate that, I told her. Scott, who had been largely silent, finally spoke up. For what it's worth from a purely financial perspective, I think you're right to maintain independence. The NHS contract alone justifies your current valuation. And if you can expand to other national health systems, you're looking at multiples beyond what MedTech is offering. It was perhaps the most supportive thing Scott had ever said to me, framed in the financial terms he understood. The office door opened again as Jack returned with an urgent expression. Linda, I think you'll want to see this. He handed me his tablet displaying an email from Diana, our lead investor. Linda, our firm was just approached by Memorial Healthcare System about a potential partnership with Virtual Med. They're interested in combining your training platform with their nonprofit Global Medicine Initiative to bring advanced surgical training to underserved regions. Unlike the MedTech situation, this would be a true partnership, preserving your mission while expanding reach dramatically. They've suggested a structure that would allow existing investors appropriate returns while securing the technology's medical focus permanently. Let me know if you'd like to discuss further. This might be the perfect solution to balance mission and sustainability. Diana. I looked up from the tablet, a surge of hope, replacing the day's stress and disappointment. Jack called Diana immediately. This is exactly the kind of opportunity we've been working toward. As Jack stepped out to make the call, I turned back to my family. It looks like there might be a third option beyond selling out or fighting alone, a partnership that would preserve our mission while expanding our reach globally. Is it financially viable? Dad asked, though his tone lacked its earlier dismissiveness. According to Diana, yes. Existing investors would see appropriate returns, but the technology would be protected for its intended purpose permanently. For the first time that evening, Mom smiled genuinely. That sounds like the best of both worlds. It might be, I agreed cautiously. Jason, who had been quietly observing the family drama unfold, finally spoke up. You know what's cool about all this? Despite everything tonight, the criticism, the doubts, even Audrey's thing with MedTech, you never wavered from what you believed in. That's actually pretty badass, Linda. His simple observation cut through the complexity of the situation. Throughout the roller coaster of the evening, from family intervention to billion-dollar valuation, from betrayal to reconciliation, I had maintained clarity about Virtual Med's purpose. Thanks, Jason, I said with a tired smile. Dad stood up and straightened his jacket, a gesture he typically made before delivering a final verdict on family matters. But instead of the authoritative pronouncement I expected, he simply said, "We should let Linda get back to running her company. We've interrupted enough of her evening." The acknowledgement of my authority, that I had a company to run important decisions, to make a vision to protect, represented a fundamental shift in how he saw me. No longer his wayward daughter needing guidance, but a peer worthy of respect. As they prepared to leave, Mom hugged me tightly. Sarah would have been so proud of what you're building, she whispered. And so am I. In that embrace, years of misunderstanding and cross-purposes seemed to dissolve. For the first time, my mother truly saw me, and the purpose driving my work. One by one, they filed out Scott with a respectful nod, Audrey with a whispered, "I'll make this right," Jason with a fist bump, and finally, Dad with a formal but sincere handshake. "Call us tomorrow," he said. "Let us know what you decide about the memorial partnership." "I will," I promised. As the door closed behind them, I sank into my chair, emotionally drained but oddly peaceful. The evening had begun with my family staging an intervention for my failing business. It was ending with them leaving me to make billion-dollar decisions about my successful one. Jack returned with an energized expression. "Diana says Memorial can meet tomorrow morning. Their proposal is even better than we thought." "Tell me," I said, ready to focus on the future rather than the evening's emotional battlefield. "They want to establish virtual med training centers in 200 hospitals across 30 countries, with a special focus on regions with surgeon shortages. Our technology would become the global standard for medical training, and they have the infrastructure to implement it rapidly." It was exactly the vision I'd had for virtual med from the beginning, not just a profitable business, but a transformation in how medicine was taught and practiced. "Schedule the meeting," I told Jack. "This could be everything we've been working toward." As he left to make arrangements, I gazed out at the city lights, thinking about my mother's sister, Sarah, my friend Amy, and all the patients whose lives might be saved by properly trained medical professionals. The path ahead was clearer than ever before. 3 months passed in a blur of activity. The Memorial Healthcare System partnership had exceeded our most optimistic projections. Rather than selling to MedTech Global, we had created something far more valuable, a global implementation plan that preserved our mission while generating sustainable growth. On a bright spring morning, I stood in the atrium of Memorial's flagship teaching hospital in Boston, surrounded by medical professionals, investors, media, and surprisingly, my entire family. Today marked the official launch of virtual med training centers in 200 hospitals across North America, with international expansion scheduled to begin next quarter. The podium displayed both the Virtual Med and Memorial Healthcare logos symbolizing our partnership. As the hospital's CEO finished his remarks about revolutionary advances in medical education, he gestured toward me. "And now the visionary behind this technology, Virtual Med founder and CEO Linda Wilson." Walking to the podium felt surreal. 3.5 years earlier, I had left a promising law career with nothing but a prototype and a mission inspired by personal tragedy. Now I was addressing a room full of people who believed in that mission enough to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in making it reality. "Thank you," I began scanning the audience. My team sat in the front row, Jack beaming with pride, Melissa nodding encouragingly, Trevor recording everything for our archives. Behind them sat Diana and our other investors, who had believed in us through the lean early years. And in the third row, my family watched with expressions I'd never seen directed at me before, genuine admiration. Even Audrey, who had declined the medtech position and instead helped strengthen our legal position against their patent claims, seemed sincerely proud. Virtual Med began with a simple but ambitious goal to transform medical training to prevent unnecessary deaths from procedural errors. Today, with Memorial Healthcare's partnership, we take a major step toward making that goal a global reality. I outlined the implementation plan: 200 training centers across North America this year, followed by 150 centers throughout Europe, Asia, and South America next year. By the end of the third year, our technology would be training medical professionals in over 30 countries, including regions with critical surgeon shortages. What makes today especially meaningful, I continued, is that exactly 3 years ago, I made a promise to my friend Amy, who died from a preventable surgical error. I promised that her death would not be in vain, that it would inspire a transformation in how we train medical professionals. I paused, making eye contact with my mother. What I didn't know then was that my own family had experienced a similar tragedy decades earlier. My Aunt Sarah, whom I never had the chance to meet, died during what should have been a routine procedure because a surgeon hadn't been properly trained on a new technique. Mom's eyes welled with tears, but she smiled and nodded for me to continue. These personal connections remind us that behind every statistic about medical errors are real people with families who love them. Virtual Med exists to protect those people, to ensure that every surgeon, nurse, and medical professional receives the most effective training possible before treating actual patients. The remainder of my speech covered the technical aspects of our implementation and the projected impact, a 35% reduction in procedural errors within 5 years, potentially saving thousands of lives annually. As I concluded, the applause was genuine and sustained. Reporters approached for comments. Investors congratulated me, and medical professionals shared their enthusiasm for implementing the technology in their facilities. Eventually, I made my way to where my family waited. "That was quite a speech," Dad said, the pride in his voice unmistakable, particularly the business projections. Memorial was smart to structure this as a partnership rather than an acquisition. Coming from him, this was high praise indeed, acknowledging both the mission and its economic viability. "Thanks, Dad. Those projections are actually conservative, based on our pilot program results. I particularly appreciated your mentioning Sarah, Mom said, squeezing my hand. "It means more than you know, to have her remembered this way." Audrey stepped forward somewhat hesitantly. Our relationship had been strained since the medtech revelation, but she had made genuine efforts to repair the damage. "The legal structure of the partnership is brilliant," she offered, protecting the core technology while allowing for flexible implementation across different regulatory environments. "Really impressive work." "Thanks," I said. "Your review of the final agreements actually strengthened our position considerably." After the medtech incident, Audrey had volunteered her expertise to review our partnership agreements, pro bono, her way of making amends. Her input had indeed improved several key provisions. Jason gave me an enthusiastic high five. "Next, stop global domination of medical training. Though I still think you should consider a gaming division on the side. The haptic technology would make amazing flight simulators." I laughed. "One industry revolution at a time, please." As the event transitioned to a reception, Jack approached with Diana. "The hospital directors from Chicago and Atlanta want to move up their implementation timeline," Jack reported. "They're seeing the Boston results and don't want to wait. And I've had 3 more investor inquiries just since your speech," Diana added. "The validation from this partnership has created significant demand for the Series C round." "Good problems to have," I acknowledged. "Let's discuss acceleration options tomorrow." As they moved away to network with hospital administrators, Dad approached with 2 glasses of champagne, offering one to me. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly away from the others. "A real one. Not the half-hearted version from that night at your office." "You don't need to." "I do," he interrupted gently. "I spent years measuring success by a very narrow standard, one that happened to match my own path. I dismissed your vision because it didn't fit that standard. I was wrong." He gestured around the atrium filled with medical professionals eager to implement our technology. "This isn't just a business success, though. It clearly is that, too. This is meaningful work that will save lives. I couldn't be prouder of what you've built." Coming from my father, who had never admitted being wrong about anything in his life, the words held extraordinary weight. "That means a lot," I said simply. "Your mother and I have been talking," he continued. "We'd like to establish a foundation in Sarah's name to help fund virtual med implementations in underserved hospitals, places that might not be included in the initial rollout due to budget constraints." The gesture touched me deeply. "That would be wonderful. We already have a list of facilities that need the technology, but lack resources." "Perfect. We'll start with an initial endowment of $5 million. Should support about 20 additional implementations." Mom joined us, slipping her arm through Dad's. "We figure it's time our family's resources supported meaningful work, not just status symbols." The transformation in my parents' perspective was perhaps the most unexpected outcome of virtual med's success. They had always valued achievement, but now they were beginning to value purpose as well. The reception continued for another hour with demonstrations of our technology for interested physicians. Throughout the event, I observed my family engaging enthusiastically with various stakeholders. Dad discussing implementation financing with hospital administrators. Mom sharing Sarah's story with medical educators. Audrey connecting with our legal team, and Jason examining the technical specifications with our engineers. They had become genuine advocates for Virtual Med's mission, not just supporters of my success. As the event wound down, a reporter from the Wall Street Journal, the same one who had written the original article that changed everything at my family dinner, approached for a final comment. 3 months ago, you turned down an acquisition offer reportedly worth $2 billion, she noted. Any regrets now that you've seen the partnership in action? I smiled, thinking about how different my life might have been had I taken the easy exit. Not for a second. Virtual Med was never about a payday. It was about transforming medical training to save lives. This partnership allows us to do exactly that, but on a global scale. And your valuation has since increased to nearly $3 billion, she observed with a knowing smile. The valuation is gratifying, but it's a byproduct, not the goal. The true measure of our success will be the lives saved through better trained medical professionals. As the reporter thanked me and walked away, I found myself alone for a moment, taking in the scene. Medical professionals eagerly exploring our technology. Investors discussing expansion opportunities. End of Teener. End of Tropsen. Totter 290. My team celebrating their hard work. And my family, the same people who had staged an intervention about my failing business just 3 months ago now, proudly integrated into the Virtual Med community. Jack sidled up beside me. So not bad for playing entrepreneur, huh? I laughed. Not bad at all. You know what I keep thinking about? He mused. That family dinner. If your mom hadn't seen that Wall Street Journal article. Exactly when she did. Everything might have been different, I agreed. But I like to think we'd have found our way here eventually. The technology works. The need is real. The mission matters. Still talk about dramatic timing, he grinned. Worthy of a movie scene. As the event concluded, my family gathered to say goodbye. We had plans for a private celebration dinner later that evening, a stark contrast to our last meal together. I have one question, Jason said as we walked toward the exit. If the Wall Street Journal hadn't published that article during our dinner, what would you have done? Would you have given up? I considered his question carefully. No. I might have been discouraged, even wounded by the lack of faith from people whose opinions matter to me. But I believed too strongly in what we were building to abandon it. That's what makes you different, Mom observed. That certainty of purpose. I never had that, so I couldn't recognize it in you. Well, we recognize it now, Dad added, and we won't forget it again. As we stepped outside into the spring sunshine, I reflected on the journey not just of building Virtual Med, but of finding my own voice and conviction in the face of doubt, even from those closest to me. Success hadn't come from proving others wrong. It had come from staying true to a purpose bigger than myself, even when that meant standing alone. The validation, the partnerships, the financial rewards, these were welcome affirmations, but they weren't the foundation. The foundation was the promise I'd made to Amy, and unknowingly to Sarah, and to countless patients whose names I would never know, but whose lives might be saved by better trained medical professionals. That evening, surrounded by my once skeptical, now supportive family, I realized that the greatest triumph wasn't the valuation or even the global implementation. It was the journey from doubt to belief, both my own unwavering belief in our mission and the hard-won belief of others who had initially dismissed it. Some successes can be measured in dollars. The most meaningful ones are measured in lives transformed, including, perhaps especially, our own. Have you ever had to stand firm in your beliefs, even when those closest to you doubted your path? What gave you the strength to persevere despite the criticism? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if Linda's journey resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming challenges, and share with someone who might need encouragement to stay true to their vision. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the people who initially doubt you the most can become your strongest supporters when you refuse to abandon your purpose.